What's up, welcome back to Nowstalgia. Dave here with a review of A$AP Rocky's fourth album, Don't Be Dumb. It's been almost 8 years since A$AP Rocky's last album, Testing, came out in May 2018. Obviously, that is an eternity in hip-hop. I mean, I remember exactly where I was when I listened to that album, and little did I know that we'd be waiting this long. Of course, A$AP Rocky has been around this entire time. Of course, a consistent fashion presence, in a long time A-list relationship with Rihanna. They have several children at this point. Also, more recently, Rocky's been getting a lot of accolades for his strong acting performances in films like Highest to Lowest and If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, both from last year. Rocky's been around. He's just not really been making too much music. And this album, Don't Be Dumb, had been dated at one point several times over the last 2 years or so. There was a kind of start and stop album cycle kickoff with this. I think of the lead singles at that time, Hijack and Taylor Swift, both, coming up on 2 years old at this point. Songs I really enjoyed, songs I think should have been tacked onto this album because I don't want them to get memory hold. Those were great tracks, but of course, Rocky had that lawsuit with A$AP Bari that he was able to escape without doing any prison time. And that, of course, would have been disastrous. But once he got out of that lawsuit, I was feeling more confident that this album would get to us, and whether this means Rocky's going to release more frequently or this is effectively his last album for a very long time, I really have no idea given how busy he is with other things, other pursuits. But I am broadly pretty happy with Don't Be Dumb, and I think this album delivered enough given the really long wait and extensive hype. A$AP Rocky's fourth album, Don't Be Dumb, has a lot of pressure on it because it's been almost 8 years since Testing, an album that certainly has its fans, but the avant-garde nature of it, the large departure from the majority of his music to that point, alienated a good amount of people. It was just not the most successful Rocky album that had come out. And thankfully, Rocky has avoided those concerns with Don't Be Dumb. This album may be a bit long. There's a few songs we could have cut for sure. But by and large, I really enjoyed this album for the consistency of its production and Rocky's energy levels. Lyrically, he can still be a bit up and down. I mean, that's never been his biggest strength necessarily, but his charisma, his star power has always been what made him so special and one of the standard bearers of rap in the 2010s. There are numerous songs on Don't Be Dumb that I plan to revisit, and the most high profile of them all is, of course, the ostensible Drake diss Stole Ya Flow. And no matter who that song is actually about, the song is a hard banger nonetheless. There's also some cool conceptual stuff here. Rocky doing a bit of genre experimentation, a little bit of a punk lean at times. The effectiveness of all this stuff is a bit up and down, to be expected, but by and large, I'm just happy Rocky's back, and I hope we don't have to wait almost 8 years again for the next album. And I gotta say, just reflecting on the peak of Rocky, right? That remains my favorite memories of rap, as an active listener, right? Obviously, I wasn't listening to hip hop in the 90s, despite that being my favorite era of hip hop. But in terms of rap, I was cognizant of the 2010s, especially the early to mid 2010s, when the heyday of A$AP Mob and TDE and Pro Era and Beast Coast, it was just such a time in rap, and so exciting for all the newness and the freshness. And Rocky, hasn't really been as connected with that period for a while now. A$AP Ferg gave an interview at Bootleg Kev a few months ago, and following his most recent release. And Ferg was quite candid and introspective about how, Rocky and him are cool, but they're also grown men. They've kind of grown apart. They're not hanging out every day like they used to. They're not actually working together right now. And I appreciated hearing Ferg talk about that in a frank manner. There's nothing wrong. It's just nothing really going on either. And hopefully, I think everyone's broadly open to it in some undetermined time, but hopefully maybe a Cozy Tapes 3 could happen, some kind of A$AP Mob reunion of sorts, obviously, sans A$AP Bari, as we know. Regardless, Rocky being back is important, because he was and has been such an important rapper, and the New York rap void, I don't expect him to fill that all of a sudden, because he's clearly has just a lot going on. I don't expect that to suddenly change, but I'm happy with the record. I think track 1, Order Protection, get a bit of a reflection on time past from Rocky. The Bari trial, I think, is pretty clearly referenced here. The good flow switch up. I like hearing the deep A$AP voice in the background. Obviously, a callback to his early work. I think the song also kind of sets up the drop pretty well and has a pretty cool background chant. This is a song I think would certainly grow on people. Track 2, Helicopter, one of the lead singles here that just recently came out. Cool beat, faster flow. I like it overall. Track 3 is a skit. And then track 4 is Stole Your Flow. Rocky was asked if this was a Drake diss on the New York Times podcast, and he did not deny it in the slightest. It was really cool to hear him just do a full sit-down interview in general. But I just think like the writing on it is so great. First, you stole my flow, so I stole you, bitch. Obviously, that makes a lot of sense to be a Drake line. And then later on, when he kicks off the second verse, first you was my bro, pussy dude switch, turn into his op, fuck his block, he a bitch. Maybe that's still about Drake, maybe that's about someone else. Either way, also goes really hard. The effortlessness of Rocky's charisma is on display with bars like that. And what's cool about the song is you also get this industrial beat the entire time. It's not really what I expected the song to necessarily sound like. Later on, you get a Tyler shout out. That's a rapper who Rocky has continued to remain very close with and a frequent collaborator of on. They actually do a song together later in the album. Stole Your Flow, definitely a banger. I think it's probably my favorite song just because I really like the verses. Track 5, Stay Here for Life. My guy Brent Faiyaz has a huge part of this track. I like the Rocky voice in full on verse 1. Has a spoken outro, very UGK, very 3-6 Mafia. Hit Boy produced. Ken Carson is a co-writer here. I believe this song was some kind of alternate version that Carson and Brent had cooked up before. Overall, I'm happy it's here. Track 6, Playa, slower hook, verses very light, beats a bit twinkly, you have these Thundercat vocals. In general, when Rocky's a bit more lethargic and mellowed out, I'm not nearly as big a fan. And sometimes that's worked well, like people have liked stuff like that. Think about how big of a song Sundress has become, kind of belatedly, right? That has worked for people, but it's never really been my favorite mode of Rocky's. Track 7, No Trespassing. I love the back and forth he's doing with himself in his normal voice and like the deep ASAP voice. Dope beat. I think Rocky's really bouncing on this once the verses get going. Track 8, Stop Switching. This features Sauce Walka, has a Boss Man D-Lo co-write as well, which is kind of interesting. Track 9, STFU. This is actually in the intro of the Punky Rocky video. People thought this might have actually been a separate song. It is in fact a separate song. This is a new sound for Rocky, I would say. The repetitive chorus is a bit dull, but it's definitely giving me like a slow tie type energy, and that kind of leads into Punky Rocky. And like I said, I've never really been a fan of this mellowed out rock, so that song's kind of a miss for me. Track 11 though, Air Force Black DeMarco. I mean, production wise, even vocally, kind of feels like in line with the Playboi Carti sound, the Rage sound in a sense. And of course, I think maybe some of Carti's younger fans might forget that Carti came up in and around the ASAP mob. Rocky was one of his earliest fans and advocates back in the day, lest we forget. Track 12, Whiskey Release Me, jazzy, mellow, but I like the way when the beat picks up because then it gets a really great flow from Rocky. And this one features Damon Albarn of Blur and the Gorillas of all people, and also West Side Gun a little bit at the end. Track 13, Robbery. This is probably one of the most conceptual tracks here. You have this piano, you have this hand clap, this quiet delivery from Rocky. It's effectively a storytelling skit type song featuring Doechii, and him and Doechii are basically like robbers, thieves, kind of like some Bonnie and Clyde, Butch Cassidy, Sundance Kid type concept here. And I think for Doechii, it definitely fits her style, this kind of old-timey, like theatrical flair type thing. It's not a barn burner Doechii rap verse by any means. It's the type of track it is. And then track 14 is a double, Don't Be Dumb, and Trip Baby. I think Trip Baby is more interesting because it's just a bit more up-tempo. He starts to get more reflective again. Track 15, The End. I think it's a pretty cool closer. I think the production, the background vocals definitely sounds pretty engaging. And then from here we have a disc 2, which is only 2 tracks, which begs the question of why couldn't Hijack and Taylor Swift have been on this disc 2? Again, it's a fake disc as far as streaming concerned, but regardless, the first track on disc 2, track 16, SWAT Team, cool beat, good flow. I think it sounds good. And then the last track is Fish and Steak, What It Is, the latest in the long run of A$AP Rocky and Tyler the Creator collabs. And there's been a lot of those at this point, too. I actually wrote them all down. Potato Salad, Who Dat Boy, Telephone Calls off Cozy Tapes, what a banger, What the Fuck Right Now, and the Golf Media Freestyle. So this makes the 6th that's been officially released significant, right? I mean, back in the day, Rocky's, big collabing, exciting collaborator that wasn't like someone in the ASAP mob was always Schoolboy Q, right? Shout out Brand New Guy, for example, and Hands on the Wheel. But it seems like Tyler's kind of taken that mantle, and they seem to have a really genuine friendship inside and outside of music. So it's really cool to hear another entry. This is not exactly as energetic and angry and bangery as Who Dat Boy. I think it's a lot more baseline, which makes sense for the closer of the record. But yeah, shout out Don't Be Dumb. I'm happy with it. I'm genuinely happy with it. I don't think it's a groundbreaking record by any means, but I like it more than Testing. And I think some people maybe don't. I think Testing has grown on some people just for its experimentation and how different it was. And of course, it has produced one of the best bangers of Rocky's career and Praise the Lord with Skepta. Of course, I don't think there's anything touching Praise the Lord on Don't Be Dumb. Let's not get carried away here. But I think for a return album, right? Again, it's been almost 8 years. Like, it's pretty good. And if I factor in Hijack and Taylor Swift, which I continue to bring up, in fact, even Trunks off Highs to Lowest, which I really enjoyed as well, I think Rocky's in a good place. I just hope he stays a bit more active. And I'm not going to get my hopes up because he's married to someone who's had an even longer gap between new music, right? Anti came out at the beginning of 2016. Anti from Rihanna, her last album, came out during the Obama administration. Let's not forget. But I'll choose to be positive and be grateful that we got Don't Be Dumb. He's performing at Governor's Ball later this year, which I plan to attend. No announced tour yet. I hope he goes on tour just because he hasn't really done any touring in this gap either. So I'd love to see him live again. It's been a long time since I've seen him. First time I saw him, I caught Rocky on a stage dive, which just tells you how long ago that was. But yeah, shout out A$AP Rocky. Let me know what you think of Don't Be Dumb. What's your favorite song on the album? And for more music reviews, more rap reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time.